Welcome to this deep dive. We are so incredibly glad to have you with us today
Yeah, we really are. It's great to be here.
because for this deep dive, we have a really fascinating stack of source materials sitting on the table in front of us.
We do. We're looking at excerpts from a text called The Global Landscape of Modern Agribusiness and Commodity Chains.
Right. And specifically, we are looking at the notes covering AP Human Geography topic 5.7.
Exactly.
And our mission today is, well, it's pretty straightforward, but I have to warn you right up front, it might just completely shatter your romanticized image of farming.
Oh, it definitely will.
Yeah, because we are going to map out the massive, high-tech, and, highly interconnected reality of modern food production.
Which is very different from what most people picture.
Exactly. When you think of agriculture, if you're anything like me, you probably picture this very specific, almost cinematic scene.
The classic red barn.
Yes, the red barn. You imagine this multi-generational family on a modest, picturesque plot of land. They're out there growing a diverse variety of crops, maybe some chickens running around the yard.
A very fulsome image.
Very wholesome. But the reality of what actually puts food on your table today is driven by, well, aggressive economic forces, literal drones flying over fields, and these incredibly complex global supply chains.
It is a totally different world than the one we have in our heads. And to really understand how your food gets to you, we have to look at the absolute foundation of this modern system.
Which is what, exactly?
Well, the most significant shift in agriculture over the last century actually has very little to do with the physical environment.
Really?
Yeah, it isn't about a sudden change in the weather, the quality of the soil, or the global climate. It is almost entirely about economics.
Wow.
Specifically, we're looking at this monumental transition from that small-scale family farming you just pictured to massive, sprawling, commercial agribusiness. It's a fundamental rewiring of how human beings interact with the land to sustain themselves.
Okay, let's unpack this because there is a statistic in our sources that absolutely blew my mind when I read it.
I know the exact one you're talking about.
Right. It perfectly illustrates this massive gap between the illusion of the family farm and the reality of modern agribusiness. In the United States today, 90% of farms are still family-owned.
90%?
Yeah. And when you hear that number, your immediate reaction is probably, oh, great, the family farm is alive and well, everything is fine.
Naturally.
But here is the catch. Those 90% of farms produce only a measly 20% of the total agricultural output.
It's a staggering contrast.
It really is. I mean, that means a tiny, tiny fraction of massive corporate operations are churning out the vast, vast majority of the food that we actually eat.
It really makes you rethink what you're seeing when you drive past a field. And to understand the why behind that massive disparity, we have to look at the shifting goals of these operations.
Okay, how do you mean?
Well, traditionally, a family farm operated with a very specific, almost localized mindset. The primary goal was sustenance.
Just feeding themselves.
Exactly. The farmer wanted to feed their own family first, and then whatever was left over the surplus, they would take to the local market to sell.
Right.
They traditionally grew a diverse variety of crops, maybe some corn, some beans, maybe raised some livestock.
Which the text mentions is actually fantastic for the health of the soil.
It is great for the soil, but it is not necessarily the most efficient way to maximize your bank account. Agribusiness, on the other hand, operates on a completely different paradigm. It isn't about feeding a family. It's entirely about maximizing production, maximizing efficiency, and maximizing profit.
The source text actually describes this relentless corporate drive with a phrase that had me laughing because it just sounds so aggressive for farming.
The boom-boom mindset.
Yes, the boom-boom mindset, which,
Right.
really strips away the romance of the little red barn. It just sounds like a factory churning out widgets.
Boom boom is exactly right. It's a machine designed to scale up infinitely. And they achieve this primarily through what we call monoculture.
And monoculture is?
Monoculture means taking thousands of acres and growing just one single crop over and over again as efficiently as humanly possible.
So if you are one of those small family farmers trying to grow 5 different vegetables, maybe raise a few pigs, and just make a decent living, you aren't just competing with the farm down the road.
No, you're competing against a corporate giant that grows nothing but corn for miles and miles and miles.
That has to create an immense amount of economic pressure on the little guy.
It creates an absolute pressure cooker environment. I mean, think about the costs associated with farming today. The price of the equipment, the patented seeds, the land itself, the water rights, it all just keeps rising.
It's incredibly expensive.
Small family farms increasingly struggle just to turn a profit at the end of the year, let alone thrive and expand. Because of this harsh economic reality, those small farmers are essentially forced into two main survival tactics.
They only have two ways out.
Right. The first outcome is consolidation. This is where those large-scale commercial operations swoop in, purchase the struggling smaller farms, and simply absorb their land into the corporate megafarm.
They just get swallowed up.
Exactly. The second outcome, which is a bit more hopeful, is the formation of cooperatives.
I read about this. This is where they team up, right?
Yeah. Individual family farms look around, realize they cannot possibly survive alone against the big guys, so they band together. They form farming cooperatives to share resources.
So like pooling their money to buy one of those incredibly expensive combine harvesters.
Spot on. And by doing that, they gain enough collective market power to actually negotiate and compete with the larger commercial entities.
It really is a battle for survival, but it makes me wonder, how do these massive corporate farms manage to dominate the landscape so effectively in the first place?
It's a great question.
I mean, sure, they have a lot of money to start with, but how do they keep pushing the prices down so low that the small farmer just gets entirely squeezed out?
It all comes down to a foundational economic principle called economies of scale.
Economies of scale.
Simply put, economies of scale means that as a farm increases its overall size, the cost of producing each single unit of food actually decreases.
Okay, can you give me an example of how that works?
Sure. Say you need to buy a massive $1 million tractor.
Which is a huge, terrifying expense.
Huge. If you use it to farm 100 acres, you have to factor a huge chunk of that tractor's cost into the price of every single ear of corn you sell. You have to charge more just to pay off the machine.
That makes sense.
But if you use that exact same $1 million tractor to farm 10,000 acres, the cost of that machine spread out over millions of ears of corn becomes practically nothing.
Oh, wow. So the bigger you get.
The cheaper it is to produce your crop, which allows you to sell it for less, which further disadvantages the small-scale producers who simply cannot achieve those same economies of scale.
And the technology that allows them to farm 10,000 acres so easily is honestly mind-blowing. I was completely geeking out over the tech mentioned in the source material.
It is wild stuff.
I mean, we are talking about literal drones flying over fields, taking infrared pictures, and tractors that basically drive themselves. It is practically sci-fi.
It really is. And what you're describing there is the first major pillar of this technological shift mechanization.
Right.
We have moved so far beyond manual labor or even standard machinery. With GPS-guided tractors and fully automated irrigation systems, a tiny handful of human workers can manage thousands and thousands of acres of land without breaking a sweat.
That is incredible.
But it goes deeper than just cool gadgets.
Yeah.
We also have to look at the seeds themselves.
Right, because the sources talk about these crazy engineered seeds that are basically immune to bugs and can survive practically anything.
Exactly. That is the second pillar of biotechnology. This includes genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, along with highly advanced synthetic fertilizers and pesticides.
So definitely not your grandpa's seeds that he saved from last year's harvest.
Not at all. These are crops scientifically engineered in a laboratory to be incredibly tough, resistant to specific pests, and mathematically guaranteed to produce massive, uniform yields.
Wow.
And then, to tie the machines and the seeds together, you have the third pillar, precision agriculture.
That's the laser-focused stuff, right? Where they aren't just spraying water everywhere and hoping for the best.
Spot on. Precision agriculture uses technology to monitor every single square inch of a field. Soil sensors tell the automated systems exactly which patch of dirt needs a little more nitrogen, or exactly how many drops of water a specific plant needs.
That is absurdly efficient.
It ensures that water, fertilizer, and seeds are used with absolute pinpoint efficiency. Nothing is wasted, and the yield is maximized to its absolute physical limit.
It's like a factory floor, but outside in the dirt.
What's fascinating here is the ultimate result of all this technology. It isn't just about corporate profits and cool drones. It fundamentally alters the planet's relationship with the human race.
How so?
All of this mechanization, biotechnology, and precision agriculture drastically increases the Earth's carrying capacity.
Carrying capacity. I remember that term from the text, but let's break that down because it sounds a bit academic.
Sure. Think of the Earth like a massive life raft floating in the ocean. For most of human history, That raft could only hold so many people before it sank.
Right, there was a physical limit to how much food we could coax out of the dirt.
Exactly. That limit is the carrying capacity. But this high-tech agricultural revolution essentially figured out a way to magically expand the size of the raft.
By getting more food out of the same amount of land?
Yes, by producing significantly higher yields on much less land, this technology is the literal reason the planet can physically sustain our incredibly large and continuously growing human population. Without these advancements, we simply wouldn't have enough food to feed everyone alive today.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because growing the food, even with all the drones and the engineered seeds, is really only half the story.
It's just the beginning.
The sources introduce this concept called a commodity chain, and I absolutely love the way the text describes this. It says the commodity chain is the series of links that brings a product from the dirt in a field all the way to the consumer's mouth hole.
Mouthful.
Which, I have to say, mouth hole is a profoundly unappetizing geographical term, but it is entirely accurate.
Very accurate.
It's an incredible journey, and there are 5 distinct stages to this chain. First, you have production, that is the farmer actually growing the raw material in the dirt.
Right.
Second is processing, where that raw dirt-covered product is converted into an actual usable good. Third is distribution, putting those goods on trucks, massive cargo ships, or cargo planes to move them across the world.
Then you get to the store.
Exactly. Fourth is retail, where a store, a supermarket, or a restaurant actually sells the product to you. And finally, the 5th stage is consumption, when it actually enters your mouth hole.
The famous mouth hole.
Let's look at something we all know to really make this concrete. The sources use the McDonald's French fry as an example, and the journey of that single fry perfectly illustrates how crazy this chain is.
It's a great example.
It starts with the production stage. A massive corporate farm out in Idaho growing thousands of acres of very specific potatoes.
Then comes processing. Those potatoes are dug up and shipped to a massive industrial factory where machines wash them, peel them, precisely cut them into that iconic uniform shape, and flash freeze them.
Then distribution, a massive fleet of refrigerated trucks, drives those frozen fries across the country, keeping them at the exact right temperature.
Then retail. A local McDonald's franchise buys them, drops them in the deep fryer, salts them, and hands them over the counter to you in a little red cardboard box.
And finally, consumption. You eat the fry.
It is a massive, highly orchestrated ballet of logistics. And that journey perfectly illustrates the next major concept we need to tackle: vertical integration.
Vertical integration.
To understand how modern agribusiness truly maximizes its profit and dominance, you have to realize that large corporations do not just want to buy potatoes from farmers. They want to own the entire board.
Meaning what?
Vertical integration occurs when a single company owns multiple stages of that commodity chain you just described.
Wait, so you were telling me they aren't just farming. They are essentially running their own private trucking companies and processing empires on top of it.
In many cases, yes. Instead of McDonald's or another massive food corporation buying potatoes from an independent farmer and then paying an independent factory to process them and then hiring an independent trucking company to move them,
They just do it all themselves.
a massive vertically integrated corporation will just buy the potato farm itself. Then they will build and own the processing plant, and then they will buy the fleet of distribution trucks.
That is wild. They are essentially just paying themselves at every single step of the journey. The money never leaves the corporate umbrella.
It stays right there.
But how is a family farm supposed to compete with a monopoly like that?
They really can't. And that is the profound impact of vertical integration. By bypassing external suppliers and keeping all those costs entirely in-house, these vertically integrated megacorporations become incredibly powerful.
Because they aren't paying a middleman at every step.
Exactly. Their overall costs drop drastically. This gives them the ability to completely set the market rules. They dictate the prices, they dictate the quality standards, and they create a financial environment that is impossible for a small operation to survive in.
It's just rigged against the little guy.
If you're a small independent potato farmer, you still have to pay the independent trucker and the independent processor. You can't possibly meet the insanely low retail price point of a corporation that owns its entire supply chain from the dirt to the fryer.
This brings us to the geography of it all, because obviously this massive system doesn't exist in a vacuum. It takes up physical space.
It dictates the entire map.
Modern agriculture is a highly interconnected global web. It's crazy to think about the geography of this. It's a system where a corporate boardroom decision made in one country completely dictates what a farmer actually plants in the ground on the other side of the planet.
Yes, absolutely.
Like if you drive through the American Midwest, you see oceans of corn stretching out to the horizon, and you naturally assume it's for humans to eat. You picture it ending up on a dinner plate at a summer barbecue.
Right, but the reality is very different. The end product is rarely just an ear of corn on a plate. Those massive operations in the U.S. Corn Belt are growing corn, primarily for animal feed, for heavily processed food products like high fructose corn syrup, and even for ethanol to fuel our cars.
So we're growing food to power cars.
Yeah, the visual of the farm doesn't match the destination of the crop, and we see a similar, deeply interconnected dynamic with global soybeans. If you look at the massive surge in soybean production happening right now down in South America, it isn't primarily because South Americans suddenly decided to eat significantly more tofu.
Right. The sources point out that the South American production is heavily driven by international demand. Specifically, they are growing it to feed the massive livestock industries in Europe and China.
Which is an incredible geographical connection.
So you have land being cleared in Brazil just to ensure there is cheap feed for a pig living in China.
Exactly. The land use in one hemisphere is entirely dictated by the dietary habits of another. The coffee industry is another wild example of this geographical disconnect.
Oh yeah, let's talk about coffee.
Brazil is a primary producer of raw coffee beans. They grow massive, massive amounts of it. But the raw bean itself doesn't actually command the highest price.
The real money is in the brand, right?
Precisely. The real value add, the processing, the specialized roasting, the fancy packaging, the marketing often happens thousands of miles away in Europe.
So the dirt and the labor are in South America, but the premium-priced finished product is finalized in Europe before it is sold globally.
The profit is geographically separated from the farming.
And it isn't just happening between different continents either. The sources point out that even within Europe itself, the landscape is totally shifting.
The dairy farms.
Yes. You have these historical, picturesque, small dairy farms in Europe that are rapidly consolidating into much larger commercial entities. And they aren't doing this to supply more milk to the local village. They are consolidating strictly to facilitate the massive export of milk and cheese to the rest of the world.
It's all about the global market now.
So what does this all mean? We've talked about the drones, the incredible corporate profits, the ruthless efficiency, and these massive global supply chains. But what is the actual human impact on the ground when agriculture shifts away from the family and toward the globe?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it fundamentally reshapes the map of human settlement, particularly in rural areas.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Think back to the mechanization we discussed earlier. When one single person sitting in an air-conditioned, GPS-guided tractor can do the work that used to require 50 people out in the sun, human labor is entirely replaced.
Which means those jobs are just gone.
As a result, rural demographics shift drastically. People leave agricultural communities and move to cities because the farming jobs simply aren't there anymore. Small towns start to hollow out.
That's devastating.
It is. Furthermore, local economies and local food accessibility are now completely dictated by the whims of global agribusinesses. A local farmer living in a rural community is no longer just dealing with the local town market or the weather in their county.
They're dealing with the whole world.
Their livelihood is tethered directly to the wild, unpredictable fluctuations of international commodity markets. If demand for pork suddenly drops in China, a soybean farmer in South America might face sudden financial ruin. The local is entirely at the mercy of the global.
It is an incredible web of cause and effect. Everything is tied to everything else.
It really is.
So, to wrap up this deep dive, the main takeaway for you, the listener, is that the food sitting on your plate right now is no longer just a simple product of local weather, good dirt, and a farmer's hard work.
Far from it.
It is the end result of immense global economic forces, high-tech monocultures, and deeply integrated corporate commodity chains. The next time you sit down to drink a cup of coffee or eat a French fry, take a second to just visualize it.
It's a powerful exercise.
Visualize the drones scanning the fields for nitrogen levels, the massive corporate consolidation happening behind the scenes, the shipping containers crossing the ocean, and the incredible, highly orchestrated global journey that brought that specific piece of food directly to you.
It truly is an engineering marvel, and it feeds billions of people. But it does leave us with a critical vulnerability.
I love that.
I want to leave you with this final, lingering question to ponder on your own after you finish listening.
Okay.
If our entire global food supply relies on this highly optimized, vertically integrated global chain, a chain that heavily favors corporate monocultures and ruthless efficiency over local diversity and resilience. What happens to global food security if just one major link in that incredibly complex chain completely breaks down?